Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Welcome, welcome. Very happy to have everyone here. I'm going to just say a few things up front, and then we will get to as many questions as we can. I'm joined by some of my colleagues who I may jump in to help me answer questions, or I may turn to. Our Community Affairs Commissioner, Marco Carrion, our Commissioner for Immigrant Affairs, Nisha Agarwal, our Human Rights Commissioner and Chair, Carmelyn Malalis, our Commissioner for Consumer Affairs, Lorelei Salas, and our Senior Advisor on Minority and Women-Owned Businesses, Janelle Doris. So I welcome them all. I want to thank all of you. I think it's very, very important to have an opportunity to directly speak to the communities of this city through all of you and with all of you. I look forward to giving you my thoughts. I look forward to your questions and the issues that you raise. This is something we intend to do more frequently here at City Hall. We think it's a very good and helpful way to maximize communication between the government and the people we serve, to work with so many of your publications and outlets, each of which have such important audiences, large audiences in communities all over the city, and obviously speak all the languages of the city. So this is something we're very proud to be doing, and we look forward to doing more frequently going forward. Let me say up front, the theme here, always New York, that you see right here. This is important because in light of the election results, what I've made very clear is that our New York values are not changing, and the policies of this city government are not changing. We are a pluralistic society, a multicultural society, a multilingual society. We are proud of who we are here in New York. We are proud of being the ultimate city of immigrants. We are proud of respecting all religious faiths. This is who we are. This is who we've been for decades, and we will always be that way. And a single election does not change that in the least. So that's why we want to keep reminding all of your viewers, listeners, readers, that this is the essential reality of this city. Turning that into action takes many forms, and I want us to, of course, there will be questions today related to the new circumstance post-election, but I want to remind you one of the central points I've made post-election is that local governments govern their own affairs. Our constitutional system puts a huge amount of power in the hands of localities, and obviously states as well. So much of what happens in this country is determined at the local level. Policing, schools, public hospitals, so many things that happen are based on local decisions, local policies, local personnel. And we, based on the election we had in 2013, set forward a vision of how we would govern the city. We continue to act on that vision. That was the election that determined so much of the day-to-day life in this city and the policies that affect everyday New Yorkers. I'm not belittling the effect of a national election. I'm saying they're two very different things. Certainly there are many national policies that have a big effect on New York and things we're deeply concerned about. There are opportunities to address some problems. There's real concerns we have about setbacks that we may experience. But it's crucial that people understand how much of the decisions that affect them are made at a local level. And I want to give you some examples right now. And I want to say some of these are about economic fairness. Some of these are about human and civil rights. What I've found in years and years of representing people and serving their interests is people at the local level think about their family, their neighborhood, the school their child goes to, their job. They think about the basics in life. And they need to know that the city government is serving them on those most basic levels. For so many people in this city, it's tough to make ends meet. This is something I knew when I ran, and I've known it ever since, that this is obviously an expensive city, cost of housing in particular, so expensive. People are looking for anything that their government can do to lighten their burden. We knew that when we started our vision on affordable housing, when we implemented things like free pre-K and free after-school for middle school students, paid sick leave. All of these initiatives were to try to lighten people's burden, the economic challenges that families face. Now, there's more now I want to talk about very quickly, and one of them has to do with something that homeowners experience. We have over 600,000 homeowners all over the 5 boroughs. I'm one of them, by the way, in Brooklyn. And for years and years, homeowners were complaining, rightfully so, that they were having to pay a hidden tax in their water bill. You'd think a water bill would be about paying for the cost of water. Well, for years it turned out, decades in fact, hidden within the water bill was additional charges that basically provided revenue for the city government. It had nothing to do with water. I said we would end that. And we finally got to the point working with the city council earlier in the year where we announced we were going to no longer have any hidden charges in the water bill. Only the costs of actually providing water would be in the water bill. And in fact, we were ready to give money back to homeowners, $183 for every homeowner in New York City. We were ready to give them a credit on their water bill. Now, $183 for most of us in this city is a very big deal. You can do a lot with $183. We were going to do that this summer. It was blocked because of court action by the landlord lobby, the Rent Stabilization Association, which represents the big landlords of rental buildings. And that lobby group, very powerful group with lots of money, they went to court to block this action. We are still fighting them in court, and we believe we're on very strong legal ground. But I want you and all of your constituencies to know that the only reason they haven't already gotten $183 back on their water bill is because the landlord lobby is in court trying to stop it. The city of New York is defending the interests of the homeowners and fighting to overcome that restraining order that we're facing right now so that we can put this money into people's hands. And thereafter, we will never charge for anything other than water in the water bills. Second issue that I started working on back in September, we have, the estimation is about 65,000 workers in this city, low-wage workers, many of whom work in fast food restaurants, who, in addition to low wages, are suffering because they are not given regular schedules like most working people. They are forced to deal with schedule making that is decided at the very last minute, regardless of their family situation, regardless of whether they have a second job and have to keep to that schedule. They're constantly forced to have to show up for work at the last moment, arbitrary schedules, no warning, or else, of course, there's the danger they might lose their job. We believe that it's crucial to have fair scheduling. We are very sensitive to the reality of the modern family. Families are stretched nowadays. People are stretched trying to afford the cost of living in this city. People having trouble making ends meet, trouble trying to do all they'd like to do for their family. And so, so many people are working 2 jobs, some even more, and so many people are struggling to balance their work life with their family life, with their obligations to their children in terms of healthcare, education. To not be able to even know what schedule you'll be working is unacceptable. We've said very simply in legislation that I support that's now before the City Council, there should be an obligation for these companies to provide a schedule 2 weeks in advance, stick to that schedule. If there's an unforeseen circumstance and they need to ask a worker to do something at the last minute, compensate them, provide them extra pay for the burden of having to change your schedule at the last moment and having to, in many cases, cancel other things that are very, very important in your life. That's something that would just be an act of fairness for working people and fairness to families. And again, you know, the phrase was used long ago in American politics, family values. Well, here's an example of actual family values, things that help families to stay together and to be able to make ends meet. A couple more quick points. We believe deeply in correcting the wrongs of history, something this administration is very keenly aware of. And we know for years and years, not only has there been economic disparity, there's been economic disparity that very much reflected other problems in our society, structural racism, sexism, anti-immigrant attitudes, et cetera. We believe in economic fairness. And one of the vehicles we have in government is to provide contracts to minority and women-owned businesses. And the more contracts we provide to minority and women-owned businesses, the more we address the mistakes of the past, the more we create economic empowerment, the more we create jobs in our neighborhoods. You know, every time the city of New York gives a contract to a minority or women-owned business, there's a much greater likelihood that that money is staying in the 5 boroughs and not going to a company outside New York City, and that that money is being used to hire people from our neighborhoods and who look like every part of New York City. We have committed to a goal of 30% of all city contracts going to minority and women-owned businesses by 2021. But to achieve that goal, we need help from the state legislature. We need authorization for several reforms that will allow us to move more aggressively to achieve this goal. And it's something we're going to be working with leaders in the city, all over the city, and our state legislators to achieve. A couple more quick points, and then I look forward to your questions. Now getting to the concerns of immigrants and protecting people's rights, especially in this moment after the election. ID NYC has been a tremendous success. Well over 900,000 people have now signed up. I'm sure so many of you have heard the positive impact it's had on people's lives. I want to affirm today how committed we are to all that we've achieved in ID NYC and to protecting the folks who have signed up, and that we are resolute about the fact that we made a promise and we passed a law to give people the benefits of ID NYC and to protect them in the process. And so we continue to be committed to preserving any background information that we received in that process and making sure it is not, when I say preserving, meaning it will not leave the hands of New York City government. It will be kept here and at the appropriate time destroyed so that it will not fall into the hands of other levels of government. Next, I want to talk about another issue that's facing too many immigrants right now. And this is not new, but it is unfortunately being exacerbated in this moment because there's so much fear about the possibility of deportation. And so, unfortunately, in this crisis environment, there are some who are taking advantage of immigrants. And that's in every community, and they have different approaches and different names. One name that these folks are known by is notarios, people who pose as notary publics without having the authorization to do so and claim to be able to provide services but don't do it. The Department of Consumer Affairs over the last 3 years has been very aggressive in going after people who are trying to scam immigrants. They have taken action in almost 200 cases. We can go into more detail if you want, but the important point is to say that folks who need help, who believe they are being scammed, can call 311. We will go and send inspectors and go after any bad actors who try and take advantage of immigrants. Finally, I'm going to say one more thing and then just a few words in Spanish, that hate crimes are on the rise. It has been documented. The NYPD spoke to this earlier in the week. Some commentators are trying to suggest it's just anecdotal or parenthetical. No, it is factual. There's clearly been a real rise in hate crimes in this city and around the country since the election. That's a problem. It's a huge problem. It's generated by the rhetoric that was used in the election. It's not a surprise. We are going to address that not only in word, but in deed, very aggressively prosecuting any individuals who commit a hate crime. And the NYPD has done, I think, a fantastic job of identifying those who have broken the law and showing that there's real consequences. I know the district attorneys share that commitment to prosecution. What we need is people to speak up more. There are cases, we believe, where there have been bias attacks and they have not been reported. Absolutely essential. Any bias attack, any threat, any physical assault, any hate speech, be reported. If you see something, say something. And much better that a threat, for example, be reported so we can follow up on it through the NYPD than it be minimized and then, God forbid, later on prove to be true. So we want, please, very important to get across to all of your constituencies, much better to report. And then when in doubt, pick up the phone, call 311. Or if it's an emergency, of course, call 911. But I don't want people out of either fear or resignation to fail to tell the police what they're seeing, because you actually, by reporting something, might stop a much worse act from happening. In fact, again, some people follow through on their verbal threats. If we don't know about it, we can't stop it. So it's so important to tell people to report, and it is, of course, confidential, as it would be, by the way, for anybody, anytime, and anything involving a crime. Of course, the report is confidential, and it's important that every one of your constituents knows that. Just a few words in Spanish, and then we will open up for questions. Estamos luchando por justicia económica para familias trabajadoras. También estamos protegiendo nuestros inmigrantes con iniciativas como la tarjeta ID NYC. Somos siempre Nueva York. We are always New York. With that, we welcome your questions.
Okay. Thank you so much for inviting us. My name is Abu Tahir. I'm from Time Television and Bangla Patrika, which is served Bangladeshi community. And you know the Bangladeshi community is predominantly they're Muslim. Since the election, about 44 incidents happened, the hate crime. And you met with the elected president. And I think you expressed your concern and everything, but from the person who elected as a president, he promised that I will be the president of all. But we are not seeing the reaction of that kind of incident from the elected president. What is your comment?
I think you're right. I think there have been moments, like the 60 Minutes interview, where he took a step in the right direction, and I'm glad he did. One of the things I thought was most important about my meeting with him was to say, this is your city. I know you love your city, and there are many, many thousands and thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people, who are fearful right now, who are scared because of the things you've said and the things they fear your government will do. I wanted him to understand that to any extent I could get across to him emotionally. I want to believe that he does not mean to cause that fear in so many people's lives, but that he needs to understand that's exactly what's happening. We should all, in every way we can, set the bar high and say we need to hear a lot more from him, telling people not to engage in acts of hate or to use hate speech. Obviously, I believe also in terms of the choices he's made, including Mr. Bannon as one of his advisors, sent a very negative message, and I made that clear as well. I think more important for us here in New York City is action. I'm not going to wait on someone else to have a conversion experience. I'm going to act right now to protect New Yorkers and to set our own tone. So, for example, when Officer El-Kasari was threatened over the weekend, I wanted very much the people of New York City and the people of America to see this good young woman, 11-year veteran of the NYPD, in her uniform with her hijab on, and to hear her New York City accent, because she was born here and raised here, and I wanted them to hear, I'm a New Yorker, and I'm a member of the NYPD, and that someone had the disgusting audacity to tell her to go back to her country, when in fact she was right here in her country right now. I wanted people to see and feel that. I think we all have to do a lot of educating of people too, hoping that our president sends a better message. Yes?
This is a twofold question. First of all, on the hate crime, most of the, at least half of the hate crimes were reported anti-Semitic. And my question is, what is it? This is something that was before the election as well, and might have been increased because more people report about it, or it is reported in face of the election. So what is being done effectively, immediately, to decrease hate crimes in general? And my second question is, you're running for re-election next year, and many of your Jewish voters, your Jewish supporters, mostly Orthodox, also voted for Donald Trump. How do you balance that?
On the second question, I would say that there are a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump, whether in this city or anywhere else in the country, who were expressing their anger at the status quo. And I disagree with the decision to vote for Donald Trump, but I'm also angry at the status quo in this country. And I've said that I thought in many ways that my party needed to have done a better job explaining what we stood for and why we could address people's real concerns, particularly their economic concerns. I want to separate immediately those among the Trump voters who may have been voting out of divisive beliefs. I think that's a smaller percentage by far. But let's face it, there were a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump who had previously voted for Barack Obama, or for other Democrats. I think it's absolutely unfair to miss the fact that those individuals were largely voting out of economic frustration and valid economic frustration. In terms of this community here in the city, It's not a surprise. There are some members of the Jewish community who have been friends and supporters that I disagree with on some issues. They disagree with me on some issues, but we found a huge amount of common ground in terms of the needs of the community, in terms of working on things like affordable housing, public safety, trying to make sure that all communities are respected and their faiths are respected and their cultures are respected. We found lots of common ground, and I think that will continue. Previous question, I would say a couple of things. I believe there's a version of carrot and stick here when it comes to dealing with hate crimes. There is an increase since the election, but you're right, in terms of anti-Semitic activity, I've spoken to this, as you know. I've seen an increase around the world, around the Western world, certainly, and that has worried me for many reasons. This election has exacerbated it. There is some reality to the notion that a sense of permission was given to some people, or they received a sense of permission to act out even more blatantly on their hatred. And that's taken three forms primarily in New York City: anti-Semitic incidents, anti-Muslim incidents, and anti-LGBT incidents. Given that environment, my answer is that we will be even more aggressive in terms of arrest and prosecution of anyone who acts illegally. That we will clearly, whenever we sense a systemic threat that we can identify, we will proactively have a lot of NYPD presence available. That we have to do more to get people to report what they know, again, as I said earlier, to stop things from happening before they happen. And that we have to aggressively put forward the positive examples. So I will spend a lot of time in the communities that are affronted in solidarity and to show that we're with them. And that's part of, again, why I had Officer Alcazar with me on Monday, to make very vivid the fact that we're going to stand by any community under attack. Yes?
Can you give us your reaction to the lawsuit that was filed by 2 Republican state assembly members in order to try to stop the city from erasing others' personalities?
I think they're wrong. I think they're misunderstanding everything we were trying to do here. The law was passed with a huge margin in the city council. I signed it proudly 2 years ago. Authorizing the IDNYC program. I want to thank Nisha Argawal. Where is she? There is she. She's right next to me. I want to thank Nisha Argawal for her leadership in putting together an extraordinary program that has, gotten almost 1 million people signed up. It's a program that's worked tremendously well in terms of public safety, built with the NYPD to be an ID card that people of all backgrounds could use, documented and undocumented, but one that would put a lot more IDs in the hands of New Yorkers, because one of the things we found a long time ago, even folks who were documented didn't carry ID, and that was a real problem for the NYPD when they had an encounter with someone. So this was about public safety. This was about improving relations between police and community. It has worked beautifully, and the law said we were going to destroy the background paperwork at an appropriate time. It's in the law. It's very consistent, and there's a date. So I think the lawsuit is ideologically motivated, and I don't think it's legally well-grounded, and I believe we will win the day. Yeah.
So follow that question, do you have like a timeline when, because you're talking about a lot about we will destroy the database, and when, and do you have a timeline about that? And also, because it's an ID card, and if you destroy the database, how to prevent someone to make a fake card, or something of.
I would like Nisha to go into some of the details, because very elaborate work was done to make it hard to fraudulently reproduce the card, and that's why we spent a lot of time preparing to do it right, and the NYPD was deeply involved to make this a very secure card. The law makes clear the deadline of December 31st this year in terms of destroying background documents, but Nisha can go into more detail.
Exactly. So I think the thing I would emphasize is that the issue here is not destroying the entire database or the entire program. In particular, the law specifies the underlying documents that individuals produce to establish identity and residency. all other security features, including, as the mayor said, the actual items on the card that you may not even be able to see that prevent it from being forged, et cetera, would remain in place as the law was originally drafted and contemplated. So the card can persist, it can exist, even if those documents were under law removed.
So you just destroy like someone who applied for a car 1 year ago or 2 years ago, or you also like someone who just applied for a car like in this month, and will you also destroy that, that
So I think the cleanest example would be if the law were moving forward. So January 12th was the date that we launched the card. 2 years after that date, all the people who got their card on that date, their documents would be removed. That's just, sort of what would have happened. And so, yet their cards would still exist, the program would still exist. That's exactly what was imagined. And so if you renew your card, all of the key information that would enable renewing is still there. So the card program can still function. It's just those sort of initial documents to establish identity and residency.
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Mayor, I'm Lan Qing from MTD, Newtown NC TV. It's American Chinese TV station. I want to ask an issue about receiving refugees. As we understand, some of the Chinese, local Chinese people voted for Mr. Trump because they have the security concerns. Are you saying that when there is new federal policy in this regard, that the city will carry on in their usual practice? Or can you explain that?
Well, I appreciate the question, but I think there's an assumption that I might disagree with in the question. The city of New York has been very clear, as have cities all over the country, that we would welcome refugees fleeing violence, fleeing oppression, which is, I think, part of the history of New York City, that we have welcomed such refugees for generations, and so many of us are the children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren of those refugees. So it would be hypocrisy for us to say, well, 50 years ago or 100 years ago, we were willing to accept refugees, but not anymore. That's a different question from how the processing of refugees occurs. Under the current administration in Washington, there's a very extensive vetting process for refugees. We don't do that. No city or state does that. The federal government does that. The intelligence agencies do that. They come to a determination of who should be let into the country. As you know, it's a very small number to date. So no, I have great faith that our federal government has created a very extensive and rigorous screening process. The new administration will determine what their approach would be. But we are ready to receive refugees who pass through that process effectively. Look, I would say to anyone who voted for the president-elect because they thought there was a challenge with refugees, I would tell them to look carefully at how many refugees have come and how few have been involved in any kind of act of violence. I think it's a horrible stereotype to suggest that refugees, overwhelmingly, by the way, families, children, they did not commit to active violence. A few stray individuals have, but juxtapose that against all the stray individuals who commit violence every day who are born here in America, and it becomes a very different issue. The mayor of Dallas, Texas, a week or two ago said something very powerful on this issue. He said he was much more concerned in terms of protecting his people about all the American-born people who get an illegal handgun and shoot a theater full of people or a school campus, that is doing much more harm to his community than any refugee ever did. So I would urge people to not accept stereotypes and look carefully at where the harm really is coming from. Yes?
I want to ask a twofold question. Number one, there's this perception out there that the city's relationship with the incoming administration of the president-elect is colored by how his stance on immigration is on refugees. There are calls in Congress to withhold funding from New York City, from Malaysia, other cities that are on the other end of this argument. We just had a couple of years ago, the administration had a political battle with the state senate. It didn't end up that well for New York City.
I don't know which one you're referring to. Well, I mean, seriously, to make your point, you have to. But when you say a political battle, it didn't end up well for New York City, what are you referring to?
Mayoral control of the school system. There was this Medicaid battle about giving the city less money for Medicaid
Yeah, I think you're mixing, respectfully, I think you're mixing a bunch of things together. I will answer your question, but I first have to correct your facts. Mayoral control education, well, I'm going to do this just one second. Mayoral control of education has been approved every time. I agree that it has not been approved in the years I think it deserves, but it's still been approved. The Medicaid cuts that were proposed were rescinded. So I'd be a little careful on the assumption, and I think it actually begins to answer your question. Political differences do not necessarily deliver policy outcomes or determine policy outcomes. If people in Washington want to say they disagree with our policy on immigration, they can say that. That's a long way from that to restricting funding, and there are a lot of legal limitations, even Supreme Court decisions that limit the way those kind of funding decisions are made. I would caution you further that the things I talk about in terms of respecting and protecting refugees, especially from a public safety point of view, the same things that Jimmy O'Neill and Bill Bratton believe about not cutting off communication between immigrants and police, including undocumented immigrants, that was the policy when Rudy Giuliani was mayor too. So it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat, Independent, Republican, over the last decades in New York City, we have adhered to a policy of our police not being immigration agents, not turning over people to the immigration authorities. Unless you're telling me you think Rudy Giuliani was too liberal, I think you would see that this is a very consistent policy and a smart one. If someone threatens our funding, we'll cross that bridge, but I don't think it's as easy as you might think to cut off funding. Okay.
I just ask myself.
Please, yes.
Just something, I don't know how other people in this room feel about this, but we had a meeting, the same type of meeting, it was at a broader level last time, around a year ago. One of the main things that was brought up was ethnic media's access to City Hall advertising in ethnic media. I'm from Hamidiya, Orthodox paper.
Yes.
I don't, they say that there was no differences.
Okay. Let me suggest a point on this, and where is Jessica will follow up specifically with you. But first of all, there are many, many outlets. And as with all media, you all are in the same field, and there's natural competition and one thing and another. We have to make a decision in each case of which outlets make sense, given whatever ad campaign we're doing, given which communities we're trying to reach, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to be just objective and say up front, any outlet might look at what advertising it's gotten and not feel it was enough or want more. That's one question. What was each outlet's individual experience? And that's always going to be different for each one. The overall is, in the last year, advertising spending for ethnic media has increased 43%, and we can give you the documentation or the breakout on that. Since 3 years ago, when the administration began, advertising buys have increased almost 300% in ethnic media. So, Jessica, stand up so people can see you. Jessica will follow up with anyone who wants details on this, both of the overall numbers, and if you have a specific concern about your outlet, please let her know, and she will make sure people follow up on that. And I know Hamidiya well, and I can say, even though I thought your first question was wrong-headed, it's a very well-respected outlet and very well-read. So if you're not getting advertising dollars, we have to figure out how to fix that. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, my name is Manzoor Hussain, and I work for India International Pakistani American newspaper. My question is, in reference to your recent meeting with President-elect Donald Trump, you pleaded the case for diversity and inclusiveness as against spreading fear and witch hunt. Do you think you will be able to convince the new administration to come around your point of view, especially in case of Congress?
I didn't go there. Again, I wasn't trying to achieve a conversion experience. I did not think I was going to have one meeting and he would suddenly see it my way. I was trying to sensitize the president-elect to the reality in his own city. I think I have a special role to play. I can speak to him about his own city. And he knows a lot about New York City. He's lived here all his life. I think he does have a deep sense of feeling for his city. And I want that to be a prism to show him what's happening, what's the result of what he is saying and doing. I would like to believe if we do that often enough, it'll have an impact. I'd like to believe that a lot of voices of conscience speaking up will move him and his team. But I also don't believe it's going to happen overnight, and I don't think it's going to happen completely, because he ran the campaign he ran, and he said the things he said, and I couldn't believe half of those things were being said. They are unprecedented for a major party candidate. So it will be a long haul, but we have no choice but to try and move things and change his mind and change the minds of the people around him. Yes?
Mr. Mayor, the president-elect said today in the interview that now he wants to help dreamers. Do you expect change about it?
Well, I raised the DACA issue when I was with him. I was well briefed by Nisha, thank you. And I just tried to put it in human terms. I just tried to let him know there were tens of thousands of young people here in this city who were contributing to our city in so many ways, who were model residents, and that, you know, one thing you could say, even if you want to debate the choices that adults made in coming here without documentation, you cannot debate the choice a child made. They did not make the choice. And I think that's a strong moral ground to appeal to him and his team on. The children who came here when they were 1 year old, 4 years old, 7 years old, they didn't make that choice. And they should be treated with special consideration. So I made the argument to him. I think it's a common sense argument. And I also said to him what a lot of people have said: are you really going to take a young person who's never known life in Mexico or El Salvador or you name the country and send them back to a place they have no relationship to anymore? Are you really going to do that to someone? I think it's a tough example to ignore. So if he's showing some openness, I think that's great. Okay, yes.
Yeah, my name is Javier Castaño from Queens Latino. We all know that President-elect Donald Trump is hiring people who scare people, but at the same time he's kind of changing the talking. Now he seems more Democrat than Hillary Clinton. And,
I don't think I'd say that, but okay. I'll see. See, it's not just you. I'm going to tell him that question's wrong too.
But in the last weeks I have been covering this type of media gatherings, the press conference, and it seems to me that it is not a unified answer to whatever he is proposing or planning to do. Don't you think that in many ways the city or the state is scaring immigrants, especially those who don't even speak English?
I don't understand how you're getting to any of your conclusions. There's nothing that Donald Trump has done that suggests he would be taking on or surpassing the positions of Hillary Clinton. There's some language he used on some economic issues you could argue was more populist than Hillary Clinton. That's true. But in terms of his overall stances on all the issues we just discussed, no, there's no, again, no conversion experience happening here at all. There is a moderation of tone. Yes, that's true. And at the same time, he's choosing some very, very ideologically rigid people for key roles. So I would be careful to judge anything yet. I think this is an individual we do not yet understand, and his actions often and his words often appear to be contradictory, and we won't know until we actually fight each fight. Which is why I think you don't see a perfect unified plan yet, because we don't even have a stable target to start fighting. We will when confirmation hearings begin, when budgets start to be passed, legislation starts to be moved. But words are really easy. You know, people use all sorts of words in elections. No one has ever done what he's done, but to be so insensitive with some of the words. But we will see from the actions who we are dealing with, and then we will fight them. But how on earth, I totally disagree with your analysis. People were fearful immediately. We heard it from so many quarters. It wasn't local leaders raising the concerns that made people fearful. They were fearful from listening to a year and a half of being told they might be deported, they might have to go on the religious registry, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Eric Martinez from LDI. I have two questions about the ID. The first one, basically, when are you going to take the decision to destroy that information that immigrants gave first when they got the IDs? And the second one, if the ID is going to be keep valid and existed, how can you guarantee to the immigrants that the federal government is not going to do anything having access to the names and addresses?
Well, we're going to be able to answer both those questions better after we go through more of the activity on this new court case. This is just initiated this week, as you know, the lawsuit. We'll know a lot more in the next few days, and we'll be able to say a lot more in the next few days. But our intention is clear. We're not going to let the documentation fall in the hands of the federal government. The law is clear. By the way, the law was never challenged. The law was passed 2 years ago, never challenged legally. So we've got to go through some hurdles, but I think we'll be in a position to say a lot more shortly. Anything you want to add? Okay, go ahead.
Hi, Ms. Mayor. Rong Xiaoxing, I'm a reporter from Singapore Daily Chinese Language newspaper. I have two questions. And firstly, I want to ask some practical advice from you to the DACA applicants who told me that they have been crying since the election and they're thinking to move because they don't feel they're safe when the government knows their address. And also for people who are told to go back to your own country, I know that you said to report to the police afterwards, but when that's happened, how should they react? And the second question is, are you going to attend the inauguration?
I don't plan to attend the inauguration. And on your other questions, and Nisha can add, but I would say, first of all, this city has a very consistent history, as I said, going back to Rudy Giuliani and before, that we do not share our information from police encounters with the immigration authorities. Now, we have a law that says if someone is convicted of serious crimes and in our jail system, that's a different matter, but not the vast majority of encounters that people have if they witness a crime, if they go to an officer to tell them they were a victim of a crime. You know, that does not involve anything with the immigration authorities. That's been true for decades and decades. Nothing here has changed, and the federal government cannot make us act differently. That's just the fact. In terms of DACA and people feeling exposed, I certainly understand that. Again, Nisha will speak to the overall situation, but I at least want all of your readers to understand that we, the city of New York, we have a 36,000 person police force. The federal immigration authorities, obviously covering a whole country, are much smaller proportionately. We are not going to participate in tracking down DACA applicants, and we're going to protect them in every way we can.
And what I would add to what the mayor said is for DACA recipients, it's very important that they talk to a lawyer if they are having concerns before they make any drastic decisions. The city provides, through Action NYC, legal services. You can call 311 and make an appointment, just say Action NYC, and get that legal counsel for your particular situation. I will also add that with many of the agencies at the table, we have put out information to the community in many different languages that reaffirms that city resources and services are still available regardless of immigration status. And in addition, we have put out with the Thrive program information about how to access mental health resources if people are feeling very troubled about the circumstance and want somebody to talk to. Those services are also available in multiple languages and totally confidential.
Hold on, I'd like our Human Rights Chair, Carmelyn Morales, to jump in.
You know, I'd also add to the extent that people are made to feel unwelcome in their own communities, or to the extent that folks in their places of employment or housing, or, you know, as they're trying to access public accommodations, are meant to feel unwelcome. The Human Rights Commission is certainly another avenue that they can investigate. For criminal activities, certainly NYPD is the place to report. For folks who are being discriminated or harassed in their communities, in the areas that I've said, they can always call and contact the Human Rights Commission. They could call 311, ask for human rights. They could also call 718-722-3131. I think a lot of the communities that are represented here, the kind of constituents of the outlets are here, know that we have offices in each one of the boroughs. Our language capacity at the commission has increased over the last 2 years from 6 languages to 28. We very much want to be a city agency that's representative of our communities, and along those lines have been really kind of strengthening our relationships with different communities. It's been a long election season, sadly. This is not something that's just come up in the last 3 weeks. And so we have a lot of those relationships already, I think, with community-based organizations and also faith-based organizations in these neighborhoods. So please do contact the commission.
Okay, yes.
Mr. Mayor, my name is Kaushik Ahmed. I publish weekly Bengali newspaper for Bangladesh community. Since the result of the election of 8th November, everything was upsetting. The result was upsetting. We didn't even expect it. No media outlet, even no poll said that he would be winning, but it happened. But since then, you have been working very hard to protect the immigrants. And yesterday, this sanctuary city resolution was passed. But we also knew that you are rerunning for the mayor in the next year. So all this upsetting, situation, do you find any negative things that can be happening in next year's mayoral election in the city?
Well, first, on the first point I want to say, and I say it every time I speak publicly, as an American, I am troubled that only one piece of the story of November 8th is being told, the Electoral College piece. And it's not invalid. Those are the rules of the game. I think we must abolish the Electoral College. I knew that in 2000, the year 2000. A lot of people knew it in the year 2000. We should have acted on it then. I feel upset that a lot of us didn't focus on it back then. But that was a walk in the park compared to this. That was a difference of 500,000 votes in favor of Al Gore. This is today, as of this morning, 2.6 million votes more for Hillary Clinton. So we cannot say that America changed. We can say that Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio voted differently than expected. States like Virginia, Nevada, Colorado were not necessarily sure things for Hillary Clinton. They went with her. It was really that a few states went a certain way by small margins that we are here in this situation. But 2.6 million more people, according to one person, one vote, 2.6 million more people supported Hillary Clinton. Therefore, it's not like the soul of America changed or that the American set of values changed. And that's where there's a contradiction in so much of the public discourse right now. I think the positions of inclusion and respect for all faith, respect for all people, respect for immigrants are actually majority positions. I think the Electoral College results have obscured that fact. But in terms of next year, no, I think the election next year will be about New York City. It will be about everyday life in New York City. It will be about people's economic needs. It will be about their ability to make ends meet. It'll be about their schools for their kids and the safety of our streets. I think that's what local elections are supposed to be about. I'm going to be focused, as I am every day, on those issues. Meanwhile, I have a new job also, which is I have to protect the people of the city against federal policies we did not expect. You're absolutely right. Not a single person, not a single major news outlet or leader said, hey, guess what, Donald Trump's going to win on Tuesday. No one heard that. So we did not prepare for that possibility. And we now have a set of policies that could hurt the people of New York City every day. By the way, I'm concerned about the Affordable Care Act. How many tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people will not be able to get insurance or might lose insurance? That will have a huge impact on our public hospitals. I'm concerned about the proposed tax cuts for the wealthy and corporations. If that reduces federal revenue, will that then come out of the Section 8 program for affordable housing? Will that come out of public housing support? Will it come out of support for mass transit or support for schools? So all of these things could affect New York City deeply. We're focused emotionally, of course, on issues like deportation and religious registries. We should be. But there's a whole set of economic and budgetary problems that could now occur to us. And those are going to affect the everyday life of people. So I've got to defend us against those challenges. Yes?
Greg McQueen from the Broad Street Press. Earlier you referenced the city's efforts to crack down on notarios who were preying on immigrants and to prosecute more of those cases. Could you and DCA provide more details on that?
I'm not sure which way to turn. Lorelei, there.
I'm here, yes. So the first thing that we want our communities to know is that they need to protect themselves against fraud
right? NDCA, along with our sister agencies, we just published a brochure with information for immigrants on how to protect themselves against all kinds of fraud, including notarial fraud. So notarios or immigration service providers who market themselves in the communities that, in Queens, Brooklyn, where our immigrants live, oftentimes mislead individuals into coming in and seeking advice from them. Immigration legal advice can only be obtained from trusted sources. And as Commissioner Agarwal mentioned, Action NYC is there providing free expert legal advice. So that's the first thing. Do not go to a notario for immigration legal advice. If you do end up going to a service provider who typically all they can do for you is translate a document, maybe help you fill out a form without telling you what to write in the form. What we see a lot is people who are often made to sign documentation without all the information being there in the documents, and then they place themselves in worse situations. We will take those complaints if someone has fallen victim to fraud, and we will investigate. We have inspectors who go out there in the field. All we need is an address. We don't even need a name from a complainant. But it's much better to work on prevention than to trying to fix the problem after.
So someone reports it as confidential then?
They can provide us with confidential information. We will investigate those cases. But if we want to actually try to address that individual's potentially getting a refund for the money they spent, obviously we will need to get their contact information.
Okay. Who has not gotten a chance so far? Yes.
Angie Damlaki from Aliwal Arabic newspaper. How can we make sure hate crimes don't continue to rise?
Look, I would say this is a community issue, meaning it's one thing, the rhetoric of a national leader, and I don't, for a moment, history teaches us over and over again that when national leaders use divisive language, it does spark action tragically. So anyone who attempts to say there's no correlation between a year and a half of hate speech on the election trail and what's happening now is missing their history and the obvious. But that being said, each community has to make a decision. And I think one of the things history teaches us, the most painful examples in history around genocide, it all comes down to what did leaders in each community do? What did clergy do? What did elected officials do? What did thought leaders do? What did police officers do? It comes down to people making choices of whether to participate or not participate or look the other way. Thank God we are not talking about anything that extreme. But we can say, if we see an uptick in hate speech, hate crime, every one of us has to do what we can to stop it. In our own families, in our workplaces, if we hear such language, to confront it, if it's physically safe to do so, obviously, to report it, to hold up examples of people under attack who are our brothers and sisters and show respect for them. If all of the people who form public opinion do that, the hate won't spread. And then on top of it, we have something which was not available in many previous circumstances, which is muscular enforcement, whether it's Human Rights Commission or NYPD. So stamp it out at the point of contact is what I'd say. Do not let it grow. Who has not asked before? Yes.
Rico Dupree from Radio Soleil, the Haitian radio station. I want to take note of the fact that both establishments, the Democratic establishment and the Republican establishment, they are very critical of the President-elect Trump. He has a program to the tune of 1.5 million expenditure proposal. If he were to do that, and I don't see this passing without the support of Democrats in Congress. And
which proposal, Rico, which proposal?
It's not a proposal, but Steve Bannon is talking about that. Pushing through massive infrastructure or works program.
The infrastructure vision, okay, yeah.
Do that, and I don't see this being done without the support of Democrats in Congress and Republicans in Congress. Would that change your view? Would you support a program like that?
Okay, this is a very good question. I appreciate it. This is going to be a qualitative issue. If Donald Trump says, I looked at the Obama stimulus, it was too small, I want to do something even bigger, I want it to run through local governments, I want to fix roads and bridges and mass transit, et cetera, water supply, I would feel, if it was honestly going to reach the people of New York City and affect our lives and create jobs, I'd want to find a way to try and work with it. But if he says, alternatively, I want to do tax credits for private corporations, and then they will invest in infrastructure, and they'll end up owning our water supply, our roads, our bridges, which is, there is that mindset out there of let the private sector own all our infrastructure, which has proven to be very dangerous and I think very ineffective. Well, that's the kind of thing I'd obviously oppose. So I think we need to understand, what is this vision? I think in the first scenario, you could see Democrats supporting it because ultimately we're here to serve people regardless of partisan label. In the second scenario, I think Democrats across the board will oppose it. So I don't think they even know, meaning the Trump people, even know what their proposal is yet. Yes?
Mr. Mayor, can you talk about the $16 billion for the MWBE and also what the city is doing to make sure that those who are entitled to that money know about the certification? Because the certification process can be very overwhelming and sometimes people tend to give up and things of that nature.
Yeah, we want to fix that. Thank you for the question. So the $16 billion commitment you refer to is in our One NYC plan. That's a vision of long-term investment through MWBEs in terms of city contracts. And this 30% goal, presuming we can get the legislation we need in Albany, obviously will animate that $16 billion reach and potentially even surpass it. The certification process, you're right, is the first key, getting people in the game. So to date, I know Janelle will have these numbers handier than I, but I know we've set a goal of 9,000 MWB firms certified by 2019. We have about half that now. We've steadily increased the number of certifications, but we want to double it. In terms of making it simpler, let me have Janelle speak to all that we're doing on that front.
Yes, so in the certification process, we began to look at it a little bit differently, hearing back from the communities. There are some components in there, particularly on the recertification pieces, that we are looking to make the program more accessible in the sense that there's some information there that we can pre-fill some of the forms. We are upgrading the portal, the SBS portal that you actually use to get certified. And we're also looking at the various components of the actual certification that if we can gather from other city agencies, if we can get that information from them to actually use in the certification. So we're looking to make that more accessible, particularly the recertification pieces. The side that we also want to say is that, we also have to have protect the integrity of the program. So folks who are saying that they are MWBs are truly MWBs, and we are seeing that is improving. But there is some need there, and we are looking to correct that in order to meet the mayor's 9,000 goal. We're doing pretty well. We're about 4,800 now, up from about 300 or so in the last year already, last fiscal year. So we're really moving to that target. And Mr. Mayor, I just want to add, we are at 3.54 billion. That's 23% in our One NYC goal. So we're actually ahead of schedule, and we're pretty excited about how that's going as well.
Excellent. Who has not had a question? If you haven't had a question yet, okay?
This is Bhargavi. I'm from News India Times and Desi Talk. Can you let us know a little bit about how your climate change agenda for New York City will change under Trump, because he keeps calling the climate change thing a hoax?
Yeah, it won't change. We're very concerned. I was happy Al Gore met with him the other day. I hope that was a wake-up call for Mr. Trump. We're very concerned about his assumptions on climate change. Thank God President Obama achieved what he did and got to the Paris Accord, and I think that, that creates a momentum separate from what America does from this point on. I think a lot of countries around the world have come to the conclusion that this has to be addressed, and I don't think the change in the American political landscape, I hope, will not dissuade others from action, but I'm certainly not happy about it. New York City will continue to do everything we're doing. We have a very strict goal of 80% reduction of emissions by 2050. We're moving to an all-electric municipal car fleet. We are requiring building owners to retrofit their buildings, and we're doing that for all public buildings right now. None of that's going to change. Who has not had a question? If anyone has not, you're not, go ahead.
Mayor, what is your recommendation or what is your message for the undocumented immigrant who has a criminal record?
I'll start and I'll have Nisha join me. Look, again, my first recommendation to everyone is follow the law. I want to be very clear. I really do respect the immigrant experience in all its forms, but I also want to be very clear that anyone who comes here should follow the law. And I don't think, even as a progressive, there's any contradiction in that statement. So if someone has committed a minor offense, we obviously are not going to turn over them to the federal authorities. If they've committed a major offense, and there's, I think, 60 categories within the city law that are major offenses, and if they're convicted of those offenses, we will. But for the vast majority of people, when you say someone's broken the law, it's a minor thing. It's a very small crime. And I would say they should understand that we believe in respecting the people of our city. We do not want our police and community torn apart and not able to communicate. And that we're going to do everything we can to ensure fairness for people. And it's very important that no one hesitate at this moment to go to the police if they see a crime or if they're a victim of crime. Like, that's something that, I don't care what someone's past history has been, there's nothing about this moment that should convince them to hold back from going to a police officer when they see a criminal act. You want to add?
Yeah, and the only thing I would add is for individuals who have these minor crimes and they are concerned about how it might impact their immigration status in the future, the message is always the same: get good, safe, legal services. And again, I just offer Action NYC as one way to do that.
Okay, I'm going to do the last to someone who hasn't had a question. If there is any, wait. This is going to be the last word out of fairness.
Do you have another hashtag, logo, maybe campaign slogan for next year, for 2017? What are some of your priorities for next year? And if you could wish our viewers a Happy New Year.
Okay, well, first of all, I wish your viewers a Happy New Year. Thank you. This is not about a political campaign. This is about New York City. So hashtag always New York and somos siempre Nueva York, and we're doing that in lots of languages, I believe, is remind people that our values and our approach are going to continue regardless of this election. In terms of what we're going to say to the people next year in the election, well, the election is next year, and that's when we'll say, I'll provide a vision for this city. But I guarantee you there'll be a lot of continuity between that vision and what I came here to do to begin with and the vision we've put forward so far. Did you have another question? Okay, did I cover it all? Okay, I want to thank, whoa. Did you ask before? No. Okay, I'm going to give final word. That's it. No, you can't pass. No. Nice try. Okay, I want to thank everyone for being here. And again, we look forward to gathering you together soon. Take care, everyone.